So recently, we heard from Neil Druckmann that we shouldn't anticipate a third installment to the Last of Us series. Now, many of us assumed that this was probably him bluffing a little bit to try to give some attention to Season 2 and also Naughty Dog's next game that's an original IP and take some attention off of The Last of Us so that those two things could kind of thrive, both the TV show and their next installment for a new IP. And of course, he's done this before. He said all the time when he knew that part 2 was happening, when they had filmed stuff, when they were working on it, that Last of Us is probably a standalone game, doesn't really need a sequel, but the whole time he was working on it. So we were a little bit suspicious that, and to be honest, hopeful that he was fibbing. There was a little part of us though that's like, what if he's not? But it looks like we actually have confirmation that The Last of Us Part 3 is coming, and in fact, it's way farther in development than any of us would have expected. They've actually been working on it for a decent amount of time and have the most important part of it already finished. So let's dive into it. So this is coming to us from Game Rant. I'll link the article down in the description below, but they're going to cover this for us. And so the article that they wrote says this: Naughty Dog has yet to announce a third entry to the Last of Us series, but one leaker claims that the studio is already working on the project and has released a few supposed details. It's been 5 years since the controversial sequel to Naughty Dog's groundbreaking zombie title, and fans have been eagerly anticipating more since then. While all official news has centered around the television adaptation and the studio's next franchise, The Last of Us may still have something in store for its fans. While Season 1 of The Last of Us live-action TV show was a big hit, the future of the game series remains uncertain. Naughty Dog canceled The Last of Us Online, that was Factions 2, after 4 years of development, and the studio is currently working on a different title, sci-fi game called Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. Still, working on one game doesn't mean teams aren't usually developing more, and at least one source seems to believe that there's a third Last of Us title in the pipeline. In a Patreon post reported by comicbook.com, noted leaker and entertainment industry insider Daniel Richman, also known as Daniel RPK, claims that The Last of Us Part 3 has already begun casting. According to Richman, part of the game will follow a group of new characters holding out against the infection in an old Victorian house. A power struggle reportedly develops between two of the characters, Val and Mason, suggesting that the Victorian house plot could be a major point for the game. Still, it's unclear if this will focus on just a smaller part or a larger part or a more complex narrative. There are still questions in The Last of Us Part 2 that have been left unanswered, and so the third game will hopefully follow up on characters like Ellie and Abby if it happens, but Richmond's leaks have not mentioned them so far. In addition to Val and Mason, the leak mentions 3 characters named Garcia, Ezra, and Lucas, the latter of whom reportedly forms a relationship with another character that has a dark turn. Beyond that, story details are scarce, which makes sense if the game has only begun casting. If these rumors are true, the game is likely still in its early stages of development, and the script is liable to change. Of course, there's no guarantee that a third Last of Us will even happen. The series creator Neil Druckmann has suggested The Last of Us will end with the TV show, though he has also floated around ideas for another sequel in the past. If Naughty Dog is currently working on The Last of Us Part 3, it will be a while before fans hear any news from it. Druckmann said Intergalactic still has a ways to go until completion, and that title still has no release window. End quote. And so if you don't know who this is, Daniel RPK is actually a very reliable source. He breaks scoops all the time, typically in the movie industry, but occasionally in the video game industry. And so he posted onto his Patreon that he actually has insider information and has talked to people who know for a fact that there have been characters who have been cast for The Last of Us Part 3. And not only that, they've actually begun filming scenes. That there is a script that is completed currently, that they are currently filming, and it seems to include a bunch of new characters. Now, this is really intriguing on several different reasons. That this takes the series in a direction none of us anticipated, that it feels very surprising, but also very welcome. That many of us have been like, let's explore this world a little bit more, show us some more, and it turns out they are going to do that. And I actually imagine that Ellie and Abby will probably play some role in this. That you'll probably start out as these new characters, and then either Ellie or Abby will show up, probably several years past when we've last seen them, in a way that's surprising. Whether this new group gets recruited by the new Fireflies, whether Ellie shows up to save them, who knows? But I'm really intrigued as to what this story could be and the direction that they're taking it. But the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this is that Neil Druckmann was lying, because not only have they been working on The Last of Us Part 3, they've worked on it for so long that they've started casting and filming scenes with people. But this thing is kind of in a can. This kind of also brings us back to another thing that Troy Baker said, is that he named that he had filmed some stuff with Neil Druckmann for an upcoming game that could be intergalactic, but he never specifically stated, or it could also be some Last of Us stuff, some flashbacks. Maybe this is part of a Joel prequel where you see the dark side of Joel, who knows? But either way, I'm super excited that it turns out, like many of us thought, Druckmann was trying to deceive. He was trying to take the eyes off of Last of Us Part 3 so that people can embrace Intergalactic and that franchise and that new IP and give it a fair chance. Because let's be honest, if they announce The Last of Us Part 3 is in development and things are moving, people aren't going to care as much about Intergalactic. That the spotlight's going to come off of that thing and they want to keep it on. Same thing with Season 2 of The Last of Us. That show is growing and gaining more and more fans, that you kind of want to keep your eyes on that specifically. And along with that, we know that Part 2 is being divided into 3 seasons, and so I imagine that this game is going to come out, if it's this far in development, or if it's been 5 years since the release of The Last of Us Part 2, and we know that Naughty Dog has a massive team that has in the past worked on massive multiple projects. That you got to remember that we had Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, The Last of Us Remastered, Uncharted 4, and The Last of Us Part 2 all come out within a relative close time of each other. That you've got to imagine that since Part 2, they've been doing some work. Intergalactic is obviously part of it. Factions sadly wasted some of their time, and that stuff will probably never see the light of day. And it makes sense that they would have been doing some work on The Last of Us Part 3 as well, especially knowing that the TV show is going to need more seasons in just a few years. I could see it actually releasing in 2 to 3 years. That when they come to the end of The Last of Us Part 2 in the TV show, that's probably when this game is going to get release. But this is incredibly good news for us Last of Us fans. It's incredibly exciting, and so I want to hear your thoughts down below. One, if they're exploring new characters and people we haven't seen before in the next Last of Us game, how do you think this plays into Ellie's story? Do you think we're going to see Abby show up? What are you hoping to see from a new group of characters and a new cast of characters? When do you think we'll actually have an announcement about The Last of Us Part 3? I imagine it'll be sometime after Intergalactic comes out. I think Intergalactic will either come out late this year or early next year. If it doesn't come by the Christmas season this year, I imagine it'll come by the summer season of the year after. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that junk, and I will see you guys in the next one.